The Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being.
My wife Lisa and I moved to Salida, Colorado in the spring of 1987. We fell in love with this area, the Arkansas Valley, up here in Colorado. It's a beautiful little town. We fell in love with this spot here. It's right along the banks of the Arkansas River, and we are surrounded by beautiful mountains. I'm an artist, and I'm very inspired by nature, by creation, and one of the things I love about God is that He is a creative God. In the very first book of the Bible, God says, in the process of creation, He says, "Let us make man in our image." And I think as an artist, there is this process where we visualize something that comes up out of us, and we either speak it into existence or form it into existence. And that's the act of creativity. The creative expression that I've come to enjoy over the last 40 years is making pottery out of clay. I'm delighted in being part of a long string of humanity that has made pottery for thousands of years. I love the idea of pottery being used that I've made with my own hands. I love the firing of pottery. I love working with clay. Every aspect of it fascinates me. Clay is wonderfully soft and formable. It responds to whatever impression it receives. And I just love that fact that I can make anything I want out of it. It yields to my hands, to the things that I see ahead for it. And I believe that we have the same opportunity with God, who is a creative God, who desires to form and fashion beauty and challenge and opportunities into our lives. And as we, like clay, yield to Him, yield to His hands in a sense, He makes beautiful people, beautiful lives out of what we might originally say, how could this happen? How could this be? Before I turn this clay into a vessel, to a piece of pottery, I need to go through a process called wedging. And in that, I am going to cut the clay in half, slam it together a few times, then go ahead and knead it, much like you would with dough. This is a fairly forceful process in order to push out any air bubbles in the clay and to homogenize it. And this is my first encounter with this piece of clay. And the clay is probably feeling that this potter's got a fair amount of strength in his hands. There's a certain amount of searching going on my part to check out the quality of the clay. Is it going to be useful for what I want to make out of it? And I'm preparing it for that purpose. This clay by and of itself is never going to become a pot, a vessel, a pitcher, a platter, or whatever. It's going to require a potter. It's going to require surrendering, in a sense, submitting to the potter's hands. And we have to, at some point in our life, agree with God, commit ourselves to God, surrender to Him.
what that means for me as a person is that there was a day in which, actually at this wheel, I decided that it was time to follow Him for the rest of the days of my life. And I submitted to Him in that and connected, in a sense, to His kingdom and to His authority, and climbed up on the wheel, if you will. At which point God began to work in my life. And I discovered so many things about God that I never knew before. I discovered an incredible, loving Father. Discovered the wonder of His Word. Discovered the presence of His Spirit in our lives. That's a wonderful idea that we could be fulfilled to the utmost in our lives by yielding to God's invitation of, let me make you into this. We may not know from the beginning what this is, but we're just simply saying, yes, yes, yes. And in the end, we can look back and see all that He's formed. And what I'm doing right now, this is called centering. I think of the centering process is the process of becoming still in God. So the centering process for me represents that time that I'm going to spend with God. Now that may sound rather strange. Does God enter the room? Do I see Him? No. Sometimes I feel a sense of His Spirit. Sometimes I feel a new peace, a new joy. Sometimes I'm inspired by a new thought. Sometimes I'll read something in Scripture or a book that's inspirational about God. I believe that God desires to communicate to us. This is not a very exciting process right now. When is the pot going to be formed? But this is foundational for a good pot. It needs to be centered. The clay has to be uniform and still in my hands. It's important for us to become still in the hands of an incredibly wise, powerful, and loving God. This clay is beginning to trust me, beginning to recognize that I have a lot of strength, but that I'm gentle in my approach to it. I don't want to destroy it. I want to form it. I want to form it into something that it never dreamt it could become. God has this vision for creation of humanity, but He also has the ability and the power to individually create each one of us. That we are unique individuals. We are not just some genetic DNA. We are, each one of us, a very special, unique creation. We can physically say that in the fact that we have unique fingerprints. Our DNA is unique, but our personality is unique. Our histories are unique. Our life experiences are unique. The assemblage of all of those pieces together, our passions, our motives, create very unique individuals. And I believe that God is weaving all of those things into each one of us for purpose, for destiny. The next thing I'm going to do here is to create a hole in the middle. Call it opening up. Go right down to the very center, the core. Throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, the word heart is used a lot. It's really not so much the emotional heart that we think of romantically, as it is the core of our being, the very center of what we are, who we are as a person. And the interesting thing about God is He doesn't do an outside work on us as much as an interior work inside of us, in our spirit, in our soul, in our mind. In fact, He desires to even dwell in us. The very beginning of creation, the story of the creation of Adam, in Genesis says that God formed or fashioned Adam out of the dust of the earth. And the second aspect of Adam's creation was that God blew his spirit into the nostrils of the man that he had formed from the earth. With that, I believe that there are two parts of us that are essential. One, to be a full person is, of course, to have a physical body and mind. The second is to have the Spirit of God indwelling us. We must be filled, be birthed from the Spirit of God as well, to have the indwelling of God. So I love the fact that in making this vessel, I have to start in the very beginning, after it's been centered, by working in the interior of the pot. And you can't see a lot of this. You know, in our world, we're so concerned with the exterior. But I think what's really important is what goes on inside of us and who's living there. And when we surrender to Jesus, He promises us the indwelling of His Spirit. That is an incredible promise. So this pot has been stilled by the hand of God, centered. The opening has been made, which in a sense the Spirit of God will dwell. Now we're going to go on to another stage, and it's a stage called pulling. It's the potter's term for it. It's the way that pots vertically grow. It's very exciting. It defies gravity, and it's done by pressure. Pressure from the inside hand, pressure from the outside hand. What I think about in that is that we too grow under pressure. And what I mean by that is, let's picture the idea that the hand that is on the inside, this hand here, that is pressing against the hand on the outside, this hand is representing the presence of God inside of us, the Spirit of God who now lives within us, the truths of God that are in our mind, the teachings of Jesus. This hand is representing the experiences that we have in our daily lives, in the world, with other people, with situations, whatever. And how are we going to respond when we encounter someone who hurts us, who speaks wrongly of us, who lies to us, who perhaps steals from us? In Jesus' teaching on the Sermon on the Mount, He teaches a lot about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not an easy thing. In fact, there are many things, many principles in following Jesus that are not easy. And we can't do them alone. We really need the presence of God within us. Because if God was not inside, these pressures can destroy us. We can go through abusive situations, maybe divorce or loss of a business or home or whatever. And that pressure from the outside can be so huge that we or this pot can become destroyed. And then there are some of us who really wish the world would go away. That if it could just be me and Jesus. The reality is that we live in this world following Jesus and His principles, surrendering to Him as our King, living in His kingdom. And we forgive our neighbor. I'm not necessarily saying to you that you need to surrender to physical abuse or things like that. I'm not saying that at all. But there are many things which we're called to do. We're called to trust that God so loves us that He's going to provide for us. We have a peace from within about that we can afford to be generous. Again, it's a pressure thing. There's so many realities of following Jesus that causes us to grow into really very beautiful people. Well, at this point, this pot could go, I think we're there. I think this is pretty good. I'm sort of a vase now. And then God comes along and says, no, I want you to go out and do this. I'm like, I don't know, God. This is nice. I like it this way. And he says, no, I have much bigger plans for you. The calling that I have for you, the vocation that I have for you is much larger. That's the exciting thing about allowing ourselves to be formed in the hands of a creating God. A God who has great desires for our lives. So I'm going to begin to stretch this pot out. Give it more form. And as I'm doing this stretching, many of us go through stretching experiences whenever there's a major transition in our life. That's a stretching experience. We don't really know what the outcome will be. If this pot could talk, it might be saying to me, you know, Potter, the walls of this pot are getting rather thin. And I know that I could collapse. If you keep stretching me like this, I don't know if I can make it. And are you sure you know what you're doing? I don't know about you, but there have been times when I've questioned that with God. God, do you know this about me? I don't know if you've ever wrestled with God, but I never win. Even if I, in a sense, win by not going His way, I lose. But if I trust in Him, that He really knows what's best, and I have faith that He can do things way beyond my self-image, I discover all new things. Just like this vessel is going to discover that it could be really robust and large, and someday filled with flowers, someday sitting in a prominent place in a house where everyone can say, oh, how beautiful that pot is. And there will be times in our life when it just seems like God is all over us. He's just bringing about so many wonderful changes, and it's very exciting. Some of us would call that revival, new life in a sense. And I think of other people who watch us when we're going through a growing time in our lives, a high mountain experience in a sense with God, which doesn't happen every single day of our lives, at least not for me, but it does happen. And I think of others, for example, this picture over here. I'm going to call her, I think I'll call her Susie today. And Susie is a wonderful picture. I formed her earlier today, and she's sitting over here, and she can't help but looking at Joseph here. Joseph, this enormous vase who's being formed, and she's really quite excited about the fact of what's happening to Joe. I mean, Joe was just a hunk of mud a short time ago, and now look at him. He's developing shoulders. He's robust and tall and really becoming quite magnificent. And there's a part of her that's going, oh, I remember what it was like when the potter's hands were all over me and shaping me and forming me. And it was so exciting. And now I'm kind of off to the side. And I hate to say it, but I almost wonder, has the potter forgotten me? Because I'm feeling a bit dry at the top. And some of us will go through times like that, where we're watching other people just developing, becoming more and more like Jesus in their lives, becoming beautiful that way, becoming mature. It's exciting to watch them, and yet with ourselves it seems quite still, quite quiet, like not much is happening. And has God left us? Did we do something wrong? No, not at all. You see, the reality is that in order for this picture to be complete, it needs a handle coming off of the back. And if I tried to put a handle on it earlier, or even right now, it's still quite soft. And I would totally deform the shape. So I am going to wait until this picture is mature enough that stiff enough up here that I can attach the handle without deforming it. My eye is very attentive to this picture. I've not forgotten it, nor has God forgotten you. There may be something that He's waiting on, maybe something in someone else's life, or some other situation that He's waiting on, or it may even be you, that He's watching and waiting until something has become true in your life, and then He's ready. At this point, when the pot is quite thin, it's really easy to make adjustments to the form. It's very responsive. Just the slightest touch. Not a lot of force. See, that's the key. In being formed by God, you need to listen. You need to be open to what He's doing and trust Him. Hear and obey. He's a great God. All right, I'm going to allow this pot to stiffen up a little bit, get ready for the next step of its life, a very vital step.
When I'm finishing up a pot that I've thrown, while it's still wet, I will often choose to remove by trimming a portion of the clay so that it's not heavy. At the end of making a pot, when it's still somewhat soft, I flip it over upside down on the wheel and I trim away the excess clay that's there, and I refine the form in that process. When you pick up a pot of mine and you examine it, you'll look at the bottom of it and my name is written on it. And that signifies the fact that this pot was not made in a factory, was not made by machinery, but was made by a person. It's an individually, uniquely created thing. In nature, God has created seasons of life. There's spring, there's summer, there's fall, there's winter. In our own lives and in the action of making pottery, there are also seasons. There are times of tremendous growth and excitement. There are times when everything seems to be dormant and still, almost like a winter time in our lives. There's a time when I make a pot in which I let it dry a little bit before I attach a handle, before I decorate it, before I alter the shape a little bit. And that pot might feel like He's forgotten me, but I've not. I'm just waiting for the perfect moment, and I'm watching for that time. And He does the same with us.
Our Creator knows us and has great patience with us, as described in Psalm 103, verse 14. For He knows how we are formed. He remembers that we are dust. Over the years, in observing myself and other people, I've recognized that we have a tendency to want to show our best side. We want to look good. The reality is that most of us have brokenness in our lives. And some of you, as we've talked about being created for purpose, for destiny, that we have callings in our lives, some of you may feel like, well, I love that idea, but you don't know me. You don't know what I've been through in my life. And you're right, I don't know that about you. God does. And you may be thinking, well, does that disqualify me? I mean, I'd love to have purpose. I'd love to have calling, but I just don't know. The reality is that my life, when I look in the mirror, is much more like this. Because I see the past. I see the times when things happened to me or things that I did that were so wrong. And I wonder if I'm no longer worthy to do this great thing that God has created me for. I want to tell you how God feels about you. Probably the best demonstration of it is in the ministry of Jesus, and particularly His teaching. One of His, I think, greatest stories was the story of a family. It was a father and two young men, his sons.
And one day, his youngest son came to him and said, "Dad, I would like to have my half of the inheritance." Well, the father, amazingly enough, gave him his inheritance in advance. And the young man took all this money, went off to a faraway place, began to live his own life, as many of us have done. And in the process, the money was soon spent. As this young man looked around trying to find work, the only work that he could find was to work on a pig farm, raising hogs, feeding the hogs, taking care of them. And to make matters worse, this young man was not even allowed to eat food from the farmer. He wasn't even allowed to eat the food that he fed the pigs. So a number of days went by like this, and finally Jesus said he came to his senses. He suddenly had a thought. You know, in my Father's house, his servants are well taken care of. They're fed, they're clothed, they're sheltered. I think I could go back and work for my Father, be a slave, be a servant. Jesus said that the Father saw his Son from a long way off, and he recognizes the walk of this young man. And he realizes, that's my boy. That's my son. He goes running across the fields because his son is coming home. And the son comes up to him and he starts to mutter something like this well-rehearsed statement of, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be your son. Let me work for you." And the father responded. The father took him in his arms and he embraced him. And he said, quick, he turned back to his servant behind him. And he said, Go kill the fatted calf, the best one we've got. Because tonight we're going to celebrate. We're gonna invite the whole village because my boy was dead. He was gone. But now he's home. He's with me. Oh, and go get the robe that belongs to our family, that has the designs, the patterns on it, that says, he is mine. Now put it on him. He's mine. And I love him. And I'm so glad that he's come back home, because we're going to heal him up. We're going to bandage up the wounds. We're going to clean him. We're going to start all over again. My boy was gone, but now he's home. Oh, you know, if this speaks to you right now, or if anything that we've talked about with making of the pottery, the vessel, which is us, has spoken to you, this would be a great time to just talk to God. Whatever it is that you're feeling that he's put into your heart right now, maybe you need to come home to him. Maybe you need to turn away from things that you've been doing that are not life-giving and come home and have real life. Come home, have the brokenness healed up.